Ramesh Babu Praggnanandhaa has just finished playing in the London Chess Classic Open tournament. Yes, you heard it right, the Open. So why was he playing there, risking his rating against unpredictable opponents? Well, it's all about qualifying for the Candidates 2026. There's a place for the highest placed player on the FIDE Tournament Circuit 2025. Now, at the moment, Pragg is in the #1 spot and likely to qualify through that route, but it's not absolutely certain. However, a good result at the London Chess Classic Open would consolidate his lead and practically guarantee his place in the candidates. So that's why he was playing there. So I'm going to show you his round 2 game from the Open tournament. He's playing against the Ukrainian Grandmaster Eldar Gasanov. And if you want a lesson in how to play the white side of the Queen's Gambit exchange variation, then stay tuned. This is a really impressive and really beautiful game. And at the end, I'll tell you how Pragg got on overall in the Open tournament. Pragg, playing white, went d4 and knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, d5. Queen's Gambit. And Pragg goes for the exchange variation and bishop g5. So this has a very decent reputation for white. I mean, there are lots of ways you can play it with black. But, well, if we think back to, well, Botvinnik, Karpov, Petrosian, Kasparov, of course, was a great exponent of the exchange variation on the white side, then yeah, it has a good reputation. Then again, black is very solid. You know, you have your nice pawn in the center. I mean, frankly, I've always played the black side of this quite happily. So here we go. Typical position, c6. Yeah, at some point, black has to play c6 just to consolidate the pawn chain and, you know, block any play on the c file. Now, Pragg's next move is very interesting. You know, the way that Botvinnik and Petrosian used to play this position was just to play f3 and potentially, you know, the bishop comes back here, but gradually, basically, white wants to prepare e4. But in recent years, black has played this seemingly anti-positional move b5 and starts expansion on the queen side. So Pragg played a4. I mean, this really is very modern chess. So preempting this b5 move. a5, yeah, claiming a square. Doesn't look too bad. I mean, black can do other things there. Knight h5 is typical, but anyway, that's another story. But, I mean, somehow it looks logical to play this move, to claim the b4 square. f3. So white's plan starts. If white can force through e4 and e5, then this is a potent initiative on the king side. Knight e6, knight centralizes, and rook d1. Now this is an important move. If white is going for e4, then of course there are enormous consequences in the position. One of them being that the d pawn becomes weaker, and you can see the knight and the queen are lined up against that d pawn. So by playing rook d1, you support that pawn on d4. Really important move. b6, so black envisages moving the bishop out, potentially also supporting a c5 advance. King h1, yeah, a very important move, because when the position opens with e4, then the king is vulnerable on this diagonal. Bishop b7. So I think here is the first moment where white could potentially play e4. Now Pragg didn't go for it. He played instead bishop f5. But e4 is critical already. I mean, this is actually quite a playable move. Normally, black would exchange and go knight g4 to try and exploit the holes behind the pawn. So obviously knight e3 is threatened. Incredibly, white can play this position. Not like this. This is the kind of play that black really enjoys. A mate threat and knight f2 as well. That's not good. However, bishop f2 is possible in this position. And, you know, potentially something like this, bishop c4, and you start to build up pressure on the f-file. Now, this is very complicated. But e4 is possible. Instead, Pragg went for bishop f5, so black is left waiting. And you can see that now there is a direct defense of the d-pawn. So e4 is still the move white is going for. And it's going to be a more secure way of doing that. Bishop b4 played. Excuse me, knight g5 played. Yeah, a move like... So I'll come back to this position, obviously, it's the game continuation. But yeah, if bishop b4, then e4 is very nice. Let's just look at some alternatives. Bishop a6 is possible. Pinning. That just slows white down a little bit. Knight h5 also possible. Because generally an exchange of bishops is desirable. And if bishop f2, then bishop b4. But then white might go for g4 and then rook g1. And not even bother with e4, but go for some kind of break with g5. You never know. So it's quite a flexible position for white. Anyway, knight g5 played, and this is certainly a mistake. Because now Pragg got in e4, and black just doesn't have very good counterplay here. So if pawn takes pawn, then white could exchange and play f takes. And with e5 coming, black is already in huge trouble on the king side. You can see that actually with the rook moving to e8, then f7 is vulnerable. Basically those light squares on the king side look very weak. You know, you can imagine e5, e6 coming, and black's king is blown open. So that's why g6 was played, trying to plug those light squares. But time for a sacrifice. Here is where it starts getting spectacular. Whoops, let's come back. Sorry about that. Pawn takes, and now e5. So Pragg's given up a piece, but he threatens queen takes g6 check with devastation, as well as the knight on f6. Now that pawn has to be covered. The best move is king h7, although black is still under a lot of pressure there, but king f7 was played. That was a little bit careless. So let's see what happened. Knight f4. Still a threat to take here, so rook g8. The knight was taken on f6. So now material is even again. Now, here's where I'm going to have a drink, and I'd like you to have a think. So how should white play at this point? White to play. What did Pragg do next? Cheers. Knight e4. Congratulations if you found this spectacular move. It's a brilliant move. Now, black ducked the challenge with bishop e7. But we need to examine what happens if this knight is taken. So first of all, okay, what happens if the knight is taken? The problem is that this diagonal now opens. And a very cool move. You don't need to check on b3 straight away. You can actually play pawn takes. So that opens up the f-file, but also keeps this check in reserve. And basically black can't escape here. It reminds me of King's Gambit positions, actually. If the king tries to step away out of trouble, let's say king g7, that's out of the frying pan and into the fire, because having eliminated the knight, then knight e6 check comes. So, I mean, black is utterly lost here. And there really is no defense. Okay, so what about knight takes knight instead? Well, then pawn takes also opens up the f-file. And if bishop takes bishop, a very cool move. Pawn takes pawn. So white is a piece down, but white's pieces are just incredible. So again, if the king steps to the side, then knight e6. So bishop f6 blocks. Knight e6 anyway. This is a fantastic idea. Hitting the queen. And if queen takes pawn, knight f4, the queen goes back. Queen b3 check, and the king just gets cut to pieces here. King g7 has to run away, check. Rook f6. And white is a winning position, basically because of that absolute monster. What a beautiful octopus on e6 controlling these key squares. So basically there's no decent defense to the rook swinging over and rook f7. And you can see that white is going to break through very, very quickly and very easily with moves like queen e3 or maybe queen h3. The king is not going to find safety here. Some really nice variations actually. So bishop e7 played. So the f-file remains closed. There's no immediate breakthrough. And this is a really cool thing. Exchanging pieces here, for example. Don't do it. Just maintain the tension. Knight f2. This is a great move. Really beautiful move. So bishop d6 played. And then knight f d3. So you can see that this square is very weak. No pawn can protect it. So that knight is looking to hop into e5. Positionally beautiful. But also a tactic. White is threatening f4. Pinning and winning. Well, the knight is already pinned, but f4 would win a piece. So the queen steps out of the pin. f4 anyway. And if the knight hops forward, then you can see that this is completely crushing. Queen threatened, and then once the queen moves, rook d6, and you can see that, well, what a crushing position for white. So after f4, knight e6 instead. Knight g4, so the knight bounces back, and there's a threat to come in on e5 with a nice fork. So the king runs to the corner. Bishop comes into a beautiful spot, and now f5. The position opens. Wow. So if pawn takes pawn, then knight d takes. You can see there's a pin here. The queen is attacked. Queen takes pawn, threatened. I mean, it's absolutely devastating. The king just cannot escape. After f5, knight f8 played. Bishop e5, cool move, just making room for the knight to come in. Bishop e7. Exchange on g6, rook f7. The rook is in. And a final little tactic. Knight takes h6 check. And here Gasanov resigned. Okay, let's just see why. So rook takes is forced. Rook g7 check. King h8. Rook takes. Discovered check. And then rook takes queen. What an absolutely crushing win by Pragg. I think there's something very attractive about his play there. It was a mix of strategy, very powerful strategy, pushing through e4, and tactics. A beautiful blend, actually. Just the way Kasparov liked to play these positions, actually. Yeah, so strategy, there we go, playing for e4. After this, it's already extremely difficult for black. And then we had the tactics with this and e5, and then, yeah, this absolutely beautiful move, knight e4. But what's interesting is that after that, You know, I like the way these knights spun round and looked to control the e5 square. Yeah, very nice positional and tactical game from Praggnanandhaa. So what happened? In the end, Pragg finished on 7 out of 9. He was undefeated, came joint first in the tournament. He gave away a few draws. Yeah, he had a few little sort of unexpected openings that didn't quite turn out well for him. That's how he gave the draws away. But it was a decent performance. As I said, he came equal first, and he shared first with Velimir Ilic from Serbia and Amit Garci from England. And in fact, he's from southwest London, who had an absolutely fantastic tournament. Anyway, that victory really did consolidate Pragg's position in the FIDE circuit 2025. And now it really take an extraordinary set of circumstances for any other player to finish above him. So it's likely that he'll get the candidate spot, but we won't know until January, until he's got it. And of course, I'll let you know when word comes through that he's officially qualified. But it's looking good anyway. Thanks for watching.